Starting out on your psychological career can be a daunting and uncertain process. There are a lot of things that you need to know. There's a lot of misconceptions about building a career in psychology as well. And on this week's episode of GetPsyched, we're going to be taking a look at everything you're going to need to know in order to start building a successful career in psychology. So, first questions first. What exactly do I mean by building a foundational career in psychology? Well, ultimately what I mean is planning for the future, thinking about the kind of career that you want to have, and starting to niche down into the demographic that you want to work in and the way in which you want to work. Now, ultimately, in my opinion, this is best done as you continue or as you start with your psychological studies. One of the biggest pitfalls that people have or that they experience when they're trying to build a career in psychology is that they start trying to do that after they've studied. One of the things you have to think about is collaboratively focusing in on your studies, but also thinking about building that career in psychology. Now, what are some of the pitfalls that people fall into when they start thinking about building their career in psychology? Well, one of the first ones is that they focus too much in on their studies, or rather, should I say, they focus only on their studies. I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of studies, obviously, when you're thinking about becoming a psychologist. But one of the things that you have to do is you have to balance those studies with thinking about other things that's going to help you in the future in your career in psychology. It's not all about your studies. One of the other things that happens is that people think that psychology is different to other industries. People don't think necessarily that it's who they know that's important, or that they don't necessarily need to network in psychology like you do in other industries. It's absolutely not the case. You have to be thinking outside the box. You have to be networking. You have to get to know people. You have to build relationships with people in the psychological field as you're studying in order to get the most out of your psychological career and in order to start building a successful career in psychology. One of the other main misconceptions, and I'm very careful about how I talk about this here though, is that one of the things that people think that they have to do, or that is going to be the defining feature of their career in psychology, is only publishing academic papers. Now, don't get me wrong, publishing academic papers is vital and a really good part of building your career in psychology. I've published academic papers, I've been part of teams that published academic papers before, and I've reaped the benefits of it. And I encourage anybody to be considering an academic paper or publishing work if they're wanting to build a career in psychology, but it is not the be all and end all. Now, if you want to go into research, if you want to work in a university, then yeah, publishing academic work is definitely a vital step, but it's not the only defining feature of you as a psychologist in the future. Like I said earlier, there's so much more than just these studies or just publishing papers in order to build that psychological career. You have to be thinking about other things as well. So, how do you actually start building a career in psychology? Well, one of the key features, one of my main points for this is building relationships, and that means network. It's really important who you know just as much as what you know. Now, a lot of people, like I said earlier, have a few misconceptions about that, and they think that that's only reserved for other industries. It's absolutely applicable in psychology as well though. It matters who you know. When I was studying, I used to draft up emails and send them out, bulk emails to psychologists, psychology organizations, therapists, therapy organizations. I wanted to network with everybody that I could in my local area and see if I could get advice from them, see if I could add value to what they were doing as well. I speak a lot at conferences and I speak a lot at psychology undergraduate conferences, and one of the questions that I hear is, how do I balance my studies with networking? Well, ultimately, you have to be able to leverage your time. You have to be able to add value to the people that you're networking to. If I'm reaching out to a psychologist, they're probably not going to answer my email if I just say, can you tell me about what it's like working as a psychologist, or can we connect further? They may be more inclined to reach out to me if I say, I'd be happy to come in for 4 hours a week and do some voluntary work for you, or maybe write some blog posts for you, or help write an article for you even. If you're able to leverage a bit of your time as a student in order to add value to those psychologists and therapists that you're trying to network with, then that can only be a good thing. I also want to say here, and this might sound contrary to what I said earlier, but you absolutely have to focus in on your studies. Ultimately, your studies are first. They come number one. So if you feel that networking or building your career in other ways out with your studies is jeopardizing your marks, jeopardizing your grades, then you need to focus in on your studies more. That was absolutely the case with me as well. I had to make sure that my studies come first. You don't need me to tell you this, but you can't have a career in psychology if you don't have a degree in psychology. You didn't need me to say that, but you know the deal. One of the other ways that you can start to hone and build your career in psychology is to find your passion and find your niche. Now, ultimately, I get a lot of questions about clinical and counselling psychology. One of the reasons why I chose counselling psychology was that I really enjoy working on that one-to-one in-depth nature. Now, you absolutely can do that as a clinical psychologist as well, but often what can happen with clinical psychology is that they're very NHS focused or they're multidisciplinary team focused at times. Not always the case, but that wasn't an area that I really wanted to work in. I wanted to work in depth on a one-to-one basis, and I wanted to work privately primarily, and I always felt that counselling psychology was my best option for that. One of the other things that you need to do is think about the demographic that you want to work with. Perhaps you want to work with men, perhaps you want to work with women, you want to work with young people or old people. Perhaps you want to work with certain disorders. Maybe you want to work with anxiety, mental health, brain injury, or eating disorders, or even obsessive compulsive disorders. Whatever you find interesting, make sure to focus in on that. Think a little bit about what your career is going to look like in the future, what you want your career to look like in the future, and network and progress on that basis. For example, one of my passions has and always will be men's mental health. And as I was studying, I realized that that was one of my passions, and so I ensured that I was networking with people who were specialists in men's mental health. Now that paid off in a great way. I managed to connect with specialists in the area, people who understood the area, people who recognized my passion and were willing to help. If people see that you've got a passion for that niche and that demographic that you want to work with, then they're going to connect with you further. My next piece of advice is to not only just get involved, but to innovate and create opportunities that are ultimately going to help you in the development of your psychological career. Now, this could be about thinking outside the box, and that's ultimately where I was talking about when it's not just about publishing papers. You need to be doing other things that you're connecting with the general public or other psychologists. You need to be thinking a little bit outside the box. This is ultimately where GetPsyched really came from. I wanted to create YouTube videos on a YouTube channel that was connecting with the general public, connecting with other professionals, because I didn't think that people were utilizing this platform in a psychological way. I saw a gap in the market, at least I thought I saw a gap in the market, I still believe that. And I created videos and was able to network on a bigger basis because of that. What I ask for you to do is to think outside the box. Innovate, create some ideas. That could be blog posts, that could be videos, that could be social media content, that could be speaking at conferences or creating workshops of your own. Any way that you can start to develop a bit of a network around you that ultimately is going to help you build your career in psychology, that's going to be a good thing. The other thing I would say here is to work from the ground up. One of the things that often happens when I talk at conferences about this is that psychology students get really pumped up, they get really excited about the idea of building their career in psychology, and they want to change everything all at once. You've got to be very, very careful, particularly if you're a young undergraduate psychology student. If you're a young undergraduate psychology student and you're wanting to become a psychologist, I'm afraid to say you've got a lot of years ahead of you of studying. Now, it's great study. I advise all psychology students to be considering becoming a psychologist, but know that you can't change everything all at once. So start from the ground up. That might be doing some voluntary work. That might be working in the care sector, whatever you can do to actually work with people. All these experiences, as you build them, are going to help you build your experiences and build your career in psychology. As I was starting out in my psychological career, I worked as a healthcare support worker. I worked as a support worker with children with additional support needs. These were difficult jobs. A lot of those jobs I did voluntarily, but they ultimately set the bedrock for me building my career in psychology. I then went on to work night shifts at a reception desk in a therapy centre. Not the most glamorous jobs in the world, but definitely jobs where I learned things, I got connected with other people. And those things were part of the foundation of the psychological career that I'm still building to this day. Had I not done those jobs that at times were difficult and at times I didn't get paid for, then I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in now. So you definitely need to be considering working from the ground up. My last point here is to set your goals. Now, you have to have your main goal, you have to have your objectives, and you have to have your small goal. Now, your main goal is what ultimately you want your psychological career to look like. Your objectives are part of the reason as to why you want that, how it might look in the future, and your small goals are the small steps that you can take on a daily basis that's going to help you get to that main goal. Now, a very brief overview. GetPsyched. The main goal for GetPsyched is to become the biggest online mental health and psychology platform in the country, and I have absolutely no shame in saying that. That's part of my desire for GetPsyched. The objective of that is to help people. I want to help people on a different scale and on different platforms. Those small goals that I'll ultimately take on every week are things like creating YouTube videos, ensuring I'm up to date with my social media strategy, utilizing blog content, and also networking with other organizations. These are some of the small goals that I undertake in order to achieve that big goal one day. Setting goals is absolutely paramount if you're thinking about developing a career in psychology. Make sure to write them down, consider what you want your career in psychology to look like, consider why you want that, and consider the small goals that you can undertake on a weekly, monthly, and even yearly basis that's going to help you get to that main goal. Guys, thank you so much for checking out this week's episode of GetPsyched. This week we've been taking a look at building your foundational career in psychology. Building that foundation is going to propel you into a career in psychology. If you've enjoyed today's video, then make sure to hit that like button. You can comment on the videos as well and I'll get back to you. And also, if you've enjoyed today's video, you're definitely going to enjoy some of the other videos that we have for psychology students. You can check this video out here on what to do with your psychology degree. And if you've enjoyed GetPsyched as a whole, then you can subscribe to the channel. You can hit that little bell next to the subscribe button and you'll get weekly reminders of every time we upload. Thanks again for watching, guys, and hopefully catch you next week.